Hello, hello, fearless listeners. Are you ready for another episode of Let Fear Bounce? It's the podcast that's all about conquering challenges and facing our fears. I'm your host, Kim Langling, and each week we'll dive into inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you turn your fear into your greatest ally. So sit back, relax, grab that cup of coffee, and let's discover how to make fear our bouncing board towards a life filled with endless possibilities right here on Let Fear Bounce. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let Fear Bounce. This is Kim Langling, your host, and I am so happy that you are deciding to spend just a small part of your day with myself and my special guest today, Karin Melberg Schwier. She is an author, and my goodness, folks, she has been writing for a long time, since she was young. She's got all kinds of writing accomplishments and accolades under her belt. And you will be able to see all of those listed in the show notes and the descriptions. But she has two books currently out there. Her first book that was published in 2013 is called Flourish, and it's a collection of stories. And her second book, Small Reckonings, was published, re-released, and published in 2023 by Shadow Paw Press. She is coming to us from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And I just think that's so fun to say. Welcome, Karin. I love having authors on the show and talking about their writing journey, because as an author myself, I find it fascinating and how everybody else's their brains work and how they think and how they got going. So welcome to Let Fear Bounce.
Thank you. I'm just impressed that you could say Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
I kind of impressed myself that I didn't flub that up as I said it. I was like, wow, I did it. But thank you once again for being my guest on Let Fear Bounce today. I've been looking forward to this. You have an impressive bio with all kinds of accolades and writing, with magazines and online different things and other anthologies. You were co-author in numerous books. When did and this is such a, I don't know, some people might even think it's a boring question, but when did your writing journey start, or why did you start writing?
Oh, wow. Well, if you ask my mother, I would sit, my brother is 4 years older. He would go off to school and I would sit at the dining room table and write myself stories. So I must have been, I guess I was maybe 4 or 5. And I would illustrate my stories, and then she would staple them together, and I'd produce a book. And I always just thought the idea of producing a book was such a fascinating, cool thing to do. What
a fun memory, though. What a neat thing, sitting at the table and your mom would put them all together, staple them together.
The cool thing was that my dad was, I mean, it's cliche to say a voracious reader, but I didn't realize that other people didn't have, floor to ceiling bookcases just stuffed with books and boxes of books and stacks of books on the table. He's going to be 96. We've had to pare down his collection. He'd be mortified if he knew that, but you can't pack them all to the care home. But they've moved probably 9 times in their lives, and every move included thousands of pounds of books. So I was always surrounded by that kind of thing.
So you had your own library.
I didn't realize that other people didn't.
And that's kind of neat. I've always been a reader, and from as early as I can remember, I loved books. I loved holding them. I loved the way the paper smelled. Turning the pages, because you never knew it was coming. You can get lost in books. You get to meet so many people, so many characters.
Oh, I remember standing in front of Dad's bookcases, just thinking it was almost hard to wrap my little 6-year-old brain around the idea that what is in there. The possibilities of what was, a lot of it was science fiction that I'm still not a huge fan of, but just the idea of all those worlds and all those characters, it was just mind-boggling.
What I used to think when I would, even in the school library, I always gravitated toward the school library. I love the smell of it. I love the smell of books. And I would think, oh my goodness, there's so many words to be read.
How am I going to do it all?
Yeah, that's just like, how am I ever going to find the time? Because, even as an adult, one of the jobs I was a legal secretary for about 10 years, and it was on like the Diamond in the center of town, where I lived at the time. And on my lunch twice a week, at the other end of the Diamond was the local library. So I would walk down twice a week, get 2 books out, read them, take them back a few days later, get 2 more out. But that's how I would spend my lunch hours, is walking down to the library. And there's just an atmosphere about being surrounded by books, for me anyway, that's very calming.
Mm. You know what? And I don't think you can be a good writer unless you're a good reader.
I agree.
You have, I mean, for one thing, I think it helps you just kind of get a grip on the creation of stories and how that can happen. But it also helps you, technically, with how things are supposed to sound, and not supposed to sound, but how, I think it's the difference between a good writer and a struggling writer or a poor writer. You don't know your tools, and the words are your tools, and you've got to know what order to put them in.
Right. And when you have, and I'm sure that you've had the same thing happen, when you have feedback from someone that's read something that you've written, and they're like, "Oh, wow, you just stopped me in my tracks," or "You brought me to tears," or "Wow, that one sentence really made me stop and think." That's, to me, the highest praise.
Isn't that great? You just kind of get goosebumps when that happens.
Yes.
I think it's great too when I mean, especially for my novel, because it's historical fiction set in, the Canadian prairies in the 1920s and on. I've had so many people who will say, I remember going to my grandma's farm. I knew exactly what that scene would smell like, or what the air felt like that day. And that I just love that, because I got them, I got, however I did that, I got them with that.
Yeah. Now, have you ever personally, because I do want to, have you ever read a book and you have just a sentence that you read and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that is so brilliantly written." And
Why didn't I think of that?
yes. And it literally stops you, and you have to almost shut the book for a second
and
just sit there in awe.
And let it sink in and go,
Yes.
how did they
Has
do
that ever happened to you?
Oh, all the time. All the time. Isn't that great? And
I love that, because then I'll start laughing. I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I love this author. How did they come?" It's just a simple line, but it's brilliant. It'll literally stop me. And I've sat there, I'll put my hand on the page and shut the book and sit there and go, "Wow.
How did they do that? How did they do? Yeah. Yeah. And or something like they'll describe something, even if it's just a simple little phrase or description of something, and you think, I have always tried to describe that, and they did it. Well, how come I couldn't have done
Right.
that?
How did they, how did they weave those particular words together when I've been trying for years to do it?"
Yeah.
I love that. It's just, that's one of the, and all you folks out there that like to read, you're going to understand exactly what Karen and I are talking about. That little thrill that you get. And hopefully you all out there are readers. I hope you're all out there avid readers. And if not, I've given you plenty of opportunity with all the authors I have on this show to get yourself some good books. And speaking of books, Small Reckonings. First off, I love the title. Catches my eye, caught my interest right away. So tell us how that came about. And you had just briefly alluded to it. It's set in the 1920s and such. So tell us a little bit about what it's about and how that book came about.
Well, it's actually it's based on a couple of true stories, true incidents that at the time I worked for an advocacy organization for people with disabilities. And I mean, the story literally walked into my office. This retired farmer came in to make a donation to the organization. He had promised to look after a friend's daughter after the friend had, an older farmer had died. Looked after the daughter who had Down syndrome. And he promised, and that's what he did. And when she died, he was directed to give the balance of the estate to our organization. So he came in, I gave him a cup of coffee, and I wanted to hear the story. I mean, I love farm stories anyway. So he told me this story. And about 15 minutes into the story, I realized that my jaw was on the top of my desk. And I said, this would make such a great novel. And he kind of laughed and he said, oh yeah, well, I guess, but that's what happened. And I said, I can't believe this is like watching a movie. This is such a great story. I mean, it was tragic. It was funny. It was, steeped in farm life, and so he left and I couldn't get it out of my head. And I mean, and it took a ridiculously long time because I was working full time. I eventually took a creative writing class at the university here. And I asked the instructor, who is actually a well-known Canadian author, if I could work on this story. I would just, I have to get this down. Sure. And he said, sure. Yeah, let's do that. So I fictionalized, a lot of it, but it's still based on something that really happened. And I worked on it and sent it out way too early. I just, I had done a lot of fiction or nonfiction books, but no fiction before. And so, I get all confident and cocky and think, oh yeah, this is great. It's only 150 pages, but surely somebody's going to think it's brilliant and want to publish it. So I'm sure I burned all sorts of bridges with publishers. Finally got it to the point where a publisher did want to pick it up, and she was a great editor, worked with me for about 10 months on it, and it came out in 2020. Now, the funny thing is that when she got my manuscript, I mean, it was way too long by that time. She pulled it apart and said, this is your first novel. And she showed me about the last 50, 70 pages. And she said, this is going to be your second novel. And I thought, I can't imagine myself publishing one novel, let alone two. But I came back to that, that leftover piece after my first novel was published and said, I think there is a sequel here. The same farmer, 15 years later, came to visit me because I had told him the first novel was out. And I said, Hank, would you tell me the story again? So I want to record it. I'd written notes, but I'd never recorded it. So he starts telling me the story like he did years before, except there was this detail that he'd never mentioned. And I said, you never told me that before. Oh, didn't I? Well, sure. That's what we thought happened. And my sequel was just handed to me. I didn't really know what I was going to do with these 50 pages that were originally in the first manuscript. And he just handed it to me. And I said, had you told me that, the first novel wouldn't have been what it became. So now I've got the sequel that's just about finished. And it's based on true incidents as well. So
it's following the same storyline, the same family.
Yep, it picks up where Small Reckonings left off. And a sequel was a little tricky to do because, not everybody will have read Small Reckonings. So the sequel had to fit with the people who did know those characters and did know the storyline, but could also stand alone as a single book without that.
So that is still a work in progress. So that's something for folks to look forward to.
Oh, everybody cross your fingers. I mean,
well, that means they have to go and get Small Reckonings. So they've got a little bit of knowledge. They got a little background then. So you got to go get Small Reckonings.
Get prepared.
Yes, prepare yourself. Where can folks find Small Reckonings right now?
It's available through Shadowpaw Press. It's also on Amazon. Probably shadowpawpress.ca is the good place to go have a look for it.
And we will make sure that those links are all in the show description and the show notes, folks. So you'll be able to just click on those. All kinds of good stuff going on then with your work in progress. Do you have anything else sitting on the back burner?
Well, it's funny. I mentioned my 96-year-old dad a little bit ago. I'm working on a piece about his experience over the last 4 or 5 months in long-term care. Dad has dementia, and so I'm doing a piece. It's sitting at about 5,000 words right now, just on the experience of I mean, that this is cliche too, but being, the sandwich generation where we're looking after kids and grandkids and looking after elderly parents. And I think some of the stories will resonate. I mean, I'm trying to make it, heartfelt and funny and tragic and, all the things you go through when your parents are getting older and dementia is a fact of life.
And so many go through it, and so many adult children
Mm,
deal
mm,
with it.
yeah. Yeah.
I was in the healthcare industry for about 7 years. I set up services. I was like the business development. So I would meet the families and set up services for
Yeah.
them.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say 90% of the people had either Alzheimer's or dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And we were setting up in-home care.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it was always the adult children, of course, that I was working with. And I saw firsthand just how difficult, how
Mm,
incredibly difficult and heartbreaking it is for everyone involved, especially if there's more than one adult child.
mm.
Sometimes there's some
Flashing.
personalities.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's as nice as I can put it. Personalities, and they would forget that it was about their mom or
Yeah.
about their dad.
Yeah.
And it was very hard for me as that person outside the bubble to nicely and gently come in and say, excuse me, we need to calm this down. We need to bring this tone down just a bit, because none of this is about you. It's about
Yeah.
care for your mom, or it's
What does
about
mom,
care for
yeah.
your dad. Yeah.
What do they need? What do they need
Right.
after an independent life where they've looked after themselves and you for decades?
Right. Yes. And that was hard to do, but I had to do it,
Mm-hmm.
because I would become frustrated. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, come on, this is not about you.
Yeah. What are you,
What you
12?
want, what you want, what you want. This is about your mom and what she needs,
Yeah.
not what
Yeah.
you want, what your mom needs. It's a
Right.
hard thing, very hard thing. So, I mean, and I think, and I'm glad that you're writing something like that, because, I'm assuming it's going to be something that's raw and real.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and like you said, funny parts, funny bits, but also heartbreaking bits,
Mm-hmm.
I could honestly say that, I mean, more people than not that I know, their parents or their grandparents have a form of dementia
Mm-hmm.
and or Alzheimer's. I don't remember ever hearing about any of that stuff when I was younger.
Well, me neither. And you wonder if did it not exist to this extent, or did we just it wasn't something that we considered was a condition.
I
It
think
was
it existed, but people were just quietly put into homes and
mm,
weren't talked about because it was taboo.
yeah,
I mean, back in that really wasn't that long ago, 1920s.
yeah.
Put that person in an institution, and they
Mhm.
were horrible back in the day.
Oh, sure. Well, it's funny you were talking about people just being quietly put away. I mean, my background and a lot of my career was in advocacy for people with intellectual disabilities. And the stories that I would collect from parents who were just shamed into putting a child in an institution because, well, I mean, one of the things that I feature in Small Reckonings, and this is, I guess, Small Reckonings has so many true stories in it that I've fictionalized. But I mean, I remember talking to parents who said the doctor told us to pretend the baby died and that they would just take the baby and place it somewhere and don't tell anybody. Just, you don't want to burden your other children. I wove that storyline into Small Reckonings when there's the couple's second child was born, and the doctor said we can make this go away, and you don't want to burden your other child with having a sister like this. So that's that kind of raw awful experience is part of Small Reckonings.
And people don't realize that there's a big chunk in history where that was the mindset
Mm-hmm.
in
Oh,
the
sure.
medical community.
Oh, frankly, I know that it's still happening, and
Yes.
you know, interrupted feeding is a polite way to say, you know, your baby has a disability, and you know, if we just kindly withhold feeding, the problem will go away.
Oh,
I mean, my stepson is 49, and my husband and his first wife, Jim's mom, were told that we can make the problem go away, and that was, you know, that was in the 70s.
I can't even imagine. I cannot possibly put myself in someone's shoes like that because I've not ever been there. But I can only use my imagination thinking it would be it would take a huge mental toll, physical toll, and financial toll to care for someone,
Mhm.
because not all families have all of that.
Yeah, yeah. People almost aren't left with a choice.
And how incredibly sad that is.
Mm.
That's devastating, actually.
One of the things that I wanted to do for sure when I wrote Small Reckonings was to make sure that little girl who was born didn't get sent away, and that she becomes part of that family. And it was at her father's insistence. The mother has issues that readers will find out about, and but the father insisted that she's our little girl, and we're going to raise her, and she's going to be part of this family, and that's all there is to it. And I know families where the husband and wife have really struggled with, you know, one wanted to do one thing and the other insisted on doing something else. And anyway, that little girl, it becomes, you know, the protagonist of my novel. I think examples like that, I mean, it's historical fiction, but examples like that, seeing people with disabilities in the community, seeing people have jobs, seeing, you know, just out there where being included and being a participant in society is the normal thing to do. That's what changes people's minds. That's what changes the minds of medical professionals.
Right. Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
There's another one. He was actually a guest of mine. His name's Stuart Carlson. He is a brilliant violinist, has all kinds of music out there. He and his father were a guest of mine, and he plays in symphony orchestras and all kinds of stuff. He's a brilliant musician, violinist, and just creates, and he writes and composes and
Mm.
creates absolutely beautiful music. It's amazing. And he just released another song because I saw it on social media, and I messaged him. I'm like, wow, look at you, Stuart. I mean, he's I think maybe in his 30s, maybe.
Mm.
But yeah, brilliant musician. I don't like the fact that people write a human off
Mm.
before
Mm.
they've even had a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions that go into looking at a little baby that's just been born and saying, well, he's never going to do this, or this. Well, maybe he will.
Yeah, because no one has a right to say that. No one has a right to play God and say this child's not worth it.
We were talking earlier about one of my other books called Flourish, and it's a collection of stories I did. I interviewed people in Canada and the U.S. and New Zealand and a couple of other places, and I wanted to showcase people who were doing really interesting things. I interviewed a young woman with Down syndrome in New Zealand who's an artist, somebody else who is a musician, somebody else who, you know, just volunteers in their community, just people who are making interesting lives for themselves, and, you know, not doing it all themselves. They have support of family or somebody in the community, or, you know, services or whatever. But just doing interesting things that aren't the stereotypical, um, you know, they go to the sheltered workshop and that's about it. You know, they're interesting, vibrant people, and I wanted to have a book where people can experience those kinds of stories. And that came out a few years ago, but it's one of my favorite books that I've done because it's very hopeful and positive, and it's not naive. I mean, people need, you know, we all need help in some form or another. different things, but I just wanted people to just experience some of those stories and I guess get introduced to some really interesting people.
And you used the word hopeful.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love that. I love that. Where can folks find your first book, Flourish?
I have copies still available. They can contact me. My website is karinschwier.ca. Karin is Karin. Schwier is SCHWIER .ca. But I've got copies available.
So they can order directly through your website then. All right.
Yeah.
That, folks, also her website. Definitely want to grab yourself a copy of Flourish as well as Small Reckonings. All those links will be in the show notes and the description. Be sure to check those out, folks. Karin, this has been just amazing. I love talking to other authors, and I'm fascinated by the topic that you write about, because I think it's needed to and you used the word hopeful. I think it's needed to get those hopeful stories out there. And
Mm.
what a blessing that your books are and those stories are and will be to folks. Maybe it'll open some folks' eyes, or maybe someone who's going or lives in or lives with or is caring for and supporting someone with developmental disabilities. Maybe that'll give them that little spark of hope, maybe that they need. It's like, oh, having a rough day, or oh, having a rough year. But then they read that and they're like, no, you know what? We can keep going. We can do this. We can keep going.
Yeah, it's important to pay attention to those hopeful opportunities. We go through our days and we hear so much bad news and we hear, terrible things are happening. But maybe just, right a couple of feet from you, there's somebody who has a really inspirational story or is an inspirational person. It's important to pay attention to those little gems.
I agree. I agree. And that segues perfectly into, I always ask my guests when we get ready to wrap up to leave a nugget of hope with my listeners. So something that they can tuck away and carry with them for the rest of the day. So what would your nugget of hope be for the listeners today?
Wow. Usually I spend a lot of time writing if I'm going to say something profound, but now I have to say it off the top of my head.
Yeah, you're on the spot, Karin.
I think maybe it's that. Maybe it's pay attention, look up, look around, and notice the good things, and remind yourself and remind others of good things. We've got a lot of not so good things out there, but don't let that cloud your vision in terms of just looking for positives.
Because they're out there.
Yeah.
We're actually surrounded by goodness every day. But like you said, look up. Get your eyes off your phone.
Yes.
Take your eyes off your phone, folks, and look up. Notice what's going on around you.
Yeah.
I always say there's all kinds of colors out here. Come out here with me where all the color is. Get out
Yes.
of that little tunnel vision that you're on, looking down on your phone or your tablet or your computer or your television, whatever it is. You don't need that much screen time.
Look up and look at the birds, smell the air.
Exactly.
Do we sound
Exactly.
like old people?
I don't care if we do. I was in my, I think, mid to late 20s when cell phones came out. So I wasn't raised with cell phones and all of that. We had a television with 3 stations. Actually, I had a black and white television, didn't even have a color one. And it only had 3 channels, and it went off at midnight.
Yeah.
That the whole, literally the television went, it played the national anthem in America. It
And
played
then
the
came up
national
with
anthem that had the flag,
yeah.
played the national anthem, and then literally all stations went off air.
And you were done watching TV then.
Right there, it was just fuzz. They went off air until the next day. So that's what I remember. Black and white, 3 channels, went off air at midnight. We listened to a lot of radio.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Our parents wouldn't. We were restricted to. I can't remember if it was a half an hour or an hour a week of TV. So you better pick your show, You miss it.
Friday night was our TV thing, and then Saturday morning cartoons. We
Yeah.
were allowed to watch that. But other than that,
Go outside.
go outside and play.
Yeah.
It was like get out of the house. That was like the rule. Get out of the
And
house.
and you
And it
know what?
didn't matter what time of year it was. If it was wintertime, well, bundle up, Buttercup, because you're still going outside.
Put your thick socks on.
Yeah. And put the plastic bags on your feet so your feet don't get wet inside your
Wet.
boots.
There you go. But I remember when I was writing the novel, the detail from my childhood on a farm that I could pull out of that well and use in my story. You just don't realize the stuff that you absorb
Right.
when you're outside in the woods, playing with the animals, doing all that kind of stuff, and you're not buried on Facebook.
So, and I often wonder, what are the youth of today, those little things that you're just talking about, what are they going to remember? Nothing, because they're on information overload.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just watching a screen, and every 30 seconds is something different.
And do we really need to know what Britney Spears is doing today?
No, who cares? Who cares? Because her life is her life, and that's nothing that you're ever going to participate in.
Yeah, so don't try.
So don't. Why I don't understand this obsession with celebrities, or like if celebrities say something that what they say is golden. No, it's not. Half the time it's uneducated and wrong. And steering you in a really bad direction.
Just go outside.
Get outside. As my grandma used to say, get outside and blow the stink off.
Stink off. Do we have the same grandmother, I think?
We might. And and I look back, I appreciate how I was raised and the time that I grew up in, because I'm outside as often as I can be.
Yeah.
All the time. And I raised my daughter that way. We were outside all the time, and she was only allowed to be on her phone or on the computer at certain times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I limited her on that. Or Xbox and all that stuff was real big when my daughter was growing up, and she was the only one that didn't have one. And she's like, I can't believe, and you're just a horrible mom, blah, blah. You get that teenage angst because everybody else has it. I'm like, I don't care what everybody else has.
Yeah.
And I never backed down on that. We did not get the whole, because I said, you will not sit in front of a TV playing games for hours at a time. I will not allow that in the house. Get outside.
You're going to have an imagination.
Right. And I never did. We never did have that.
Yeah.
So you know what? She became an avid reader.
There you go.
Uh-huh.
There you go.
So much healthier. Karin, this has been so fun. So fun having you as my guest. Thanks again for being a part of Let Fear Bounce. And please keep in touch, because I want to hear all about when the sequel to your first book, Small Reckonings, when you've got that sequel ready and getting ready to shoot it out into the world. I want to know about it. I want to know about it and have you back on so we can talk about it.
Perfect. From your lips to a publisher's ears.
Yeah. It'll happen in exactly the time it's meant to happen.
Oh, I love you.
Well, thank you so much. And again, please keep in touch, because I do want to have you back on so we can chit chat more about reading and writing and all those fun things and what you're doing. And of course, the book that's going to be coming out. Yeah, we're just going to say next year. How's that? We're going to put it out there. It's coming out next year.
Perfect.
Let's do that. We said it and we've thrown it out into the world. So now it's going to happen.
I'm waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah. See the power of positive thinking. Oh, well, have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for being my guest. And thank you for that nugget of hope that you shared for all of the listeners out there. I appreciate it.
Well, it was a lot of fun, and I'd love to come back.
Can't wait to have it happen then.
Okay.
All right. Have an awesome day. And everybody out there listening, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Let Fear Bounce. This is your host, Kim Langling. Everybody be well, stay well, and be blessed. And that is a wrap, my fearless friends. Thanks for bouncing along with me on another episode of Let Fear Bounce. I hope you're feeling a bit motivated and ready to take on any challenge that might come your way in the coming days. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Let Fear Bounce. Tune in each week for your dose of inspiration from my amazing guests from all over the world. So until next time, keep bouncing forward and stay fearless, my friends. Everybody be well, stay well, and above all, be blessed.